The new batch, 1934 World Cup, Germany. The 1934 World Cup is where Germany makes their debut at this World Cup along with 9 other nations. This would be the World Cup that had the most debuting nations outside of course, the very first World Cup that had 13. With the World Cup being in Italy, this would pique the interest of more European nations, and of course, because of the success of the 1930 World Cup, more nations was interested in competing at this World Cup, hence why this World Cup would be the first one, and since 1934 World Cup, every World Cup had a qualifying round. So this is how Germany was able to qualify for the 1934 World Cup. They were put in a group of 3 with both Luxembourg and France, just 2 of their neighbours. All 3 nations, they share borders. In this group, all 3 nations were supposed to play 1 game against each other. The first match that took place was in Luxembourg in the Stade Municipal, now known as the Stade José Barthel. Germany dominated Luxembourg in this game, a 9-1 win for Germany here. Josef Rassenberg scored 4 goals in this game. He's also became Germany's very first goal scorer in a World Cup qualifying match, scoring in just 2 minutes in. Willy Wilgold also scored in this game 10 minutes later to double Germany's lead. Ernst Albrecht as well scored the 3rd goal for Germany. That was 3-0 in the first half. Luxembourg do get a goal back. Ernest Mingil scores, which would make him Luxembourg's first ever goal scorer at a World Cup qualifying match. However, Germany kept scoring. Karl Holman would score his first goal in this game. He would himself go on to score another 2 goals. He would become Germany's first ever player to get a hat-trick during a World Cup qualifying game. Rassenberg would also score another goal in this half. So that's Germany taking a 5 into the second half. Holman would score in the 52nd and 53rd minute, making him, as I mentioned earlier, the first player in Germany's history to score a hat-trick during the World Cup qualifying matches. And Rassenberg would score in the 57th minute, completing his hat-trick, and then scoring in the 89th minute. Great win there for Germany. France would also go on to beat Luxembourg in the same stadium. With these 2 wins, Germany and France didn't have to play against each other, and they both qualified for their, well, in Germany's case, their first World Cup, and for France, they qualify and play at their second World Cup. So a short trip for Germany to Italy. Germany would be ranked as one of the seeded teams, and because of this, they went up against an unseeded team. This nation was Belgium, who would compete at their second World Cup. Unlike the 1930 World Cup, this World Cup only had knockout rounds, so no team could afford to lose at least 1 game. And also all 8 matches in the round of 16 were played simultaneously in a total of 8 different cities in Italy. Germany and Belgium played each other in Firenze at the Stadio Artemo Franchi, but at the time the stadium was known as the Stadio Giovanni Berta. There's some interesting history there. Well, anyway, currently Fiorentina play their games there. Been playing matches in that stadium since 1931. In this game, lots of goals, a total of 7 goals were scored in this game. Germany beat Belgium 5-2. Stanislaus Kuberski scored in the 25th minute for Germany, 1-0. he becomes Germany's first ever goal scorer at the World Cup. But only 4 minutes later, Bernard Warhoff for Belgium scores, and despite Belgium playing in 2 matches in the World Cup prior to this one in 1930, Bernard Warhoff would be Belgium's very first goal scorer at the World Cup. He'll also be their first goal scorer to get 2 goals in a game, because he scores in the 43rd minute, giving Belgium the lead 2-1. They take that into the second half. Only 4 minutes into the second half, Otto Siffling gives the equaliser for Germany. Now that's 2-2. And then in the 66th minute, Edmund Coleman scores, gives Germany back the lead. Then he would go on to score another 2 goals in the 70th minute, and then late on in the 87th minute, he would become Germany's first ever player to get a hat-trick. And in Germany's first ever game at the World Cup, they win, got their first ever goal scorer and their first ever player to get a hat-trick. The round of 16, every nation that competed at the 1930 World Cup, that competed in the 1934 World Cup, was all knocked out in this stage. It's Belgium, that's 3 World Cup defeats in a row for them at that time. And Germany was able to go through. These 2 teams, both being from Europe, would meet each other quite often in World Cup qualifiers and Euros and Euro qualifiers. Friendlies as well, they go against each other often. But they don't meet at the World Cup again until 1994 in the USA, where Germany do win again in that game. On that occasion, it was a 3-2 win. Alright, so Germany go through to the quarterfinals. This time they go up against Sweden at the San Siro, where both the Milan teams, Inter and AC Milan, play their home games at. This game will be the first time that both Germany and Sweden do meet each other. They do go on to have quite a lot of history, playing each other a total of 5 times. But in this first occasion, Germany do beat Sweden 2-1. No goals were scored in the first half, but in the second half, Karl Holman, who scored a hat-trick in qualifying, scored 2 goals against Sweden in the 60th and 3 minutes later in the 63rd minute, gave Germany the lead here. Sweden do pull a goal back, Bunker in the 82nd minute, but Germany hold on to the lead. They knock out Sweden. Germany tend to get the best of Sweden. Sweden only ever beaten them on 1 occasion during a World Cup match, and that was a 3-1 win in the 1958 World Cup, where Sweden were the hosts. In both qualifying and the actual World Cup itself, Germany haven't lost a game other than that match in 58. Also note the times that both Germany hosted the World Cup, that's in 1974 and in 2006, and when Sweden hosted the World Cup in 1958, they have competed against each other on all 3 occasions. Alright, this is how Germany was able to reach the semi-finals. In the semi-finals, they go up against Czechoslovakia. This match took place in Rome in the Stadio Nazione. The name of the stadium is now known as the Stadio Flaminio, but it's no longer active. I was there a couple of months back in February, not active. I heard there was supposed to be some plans, but they fell through, so currently the stadium's just abandoned. Anyway, in this game, Germany do end up losing. They lost 3-1 to Czechoslovakia, courtesy of Oldrich Nejedly, who scored a hat-trick in this game. He was also the top scorer of the 1934 World Cup. His first goal would come in the 21st minute. In the second half, though, Germany do get an equaliser. Rudolf Nowak scored, but 7 minutes later, Najedli scores his second goal in this game, and he scores his third in the 80th minute. That's 3-1. Najedli was putting in some great numbers for Czechoslovakia at that World Cup. So that's unlucky for Germany getting knocked out, but for their very first World Cup, reaching the final four was fantastic for them, reaching the semi-finals. I should mention this, outside the 1940s where no World Cup was taking place because of what happened during World War II, the aftermath, the 1942 and 46 World Cups were not played. But every decade after, starting again, back again in the 1950s, Germany have found a way to reach the final four in every decade, at least once. They won it in 1954, reached the semis in 1958, runners-up in 1966, reached the semis in 1970, won it on home soil in 1974, was the runners-up twice in the 80s, first in 82 and then again in 86, won it in 1990, runners-up in 2002, and reached the semi-finals on home soil in 2006, again would reach the semi-finals in 2010, and would win it in 2014. That's the last time they've won it, where they won it in Brazil. So they've been quite consistent there, Germany, very strong at the World Cup. They do play in the first ever World Cup third place playoff match. They went up against Austria, one of their neighbours there, both sharing a border. The stadium where these two played their match in, the Stadio Partenopeo, no longer stands. I mentioned a few times, during World War II, this stadium was destroyed back in 1943. But 9 years prior to that, Austria and Germany played in this stadium. This was a 3-2 win for Germany. 2 goals from Yilne in the first half and a goal from Konen also in the first half. Austria did score in the first half themselves, Hofrath in the 28th minute. So it was 3-1 going into the second half. Most of the goals in this game were scored in the first half, of the mentioned. Sesta, scored in the 54th minute to make it 3-2, but Germany held on and they became the first team to win a third place playoff game. A tradition that has been going on since the 1934 World Cup. The 1930 World Cup didn't have a third place playoff game. These two nations will meet again 20 years later after this third place playoff, this time in the semi-finals, where Germany wins 6-1 against Austria on their way to lifting the World Cup for the first time in their history. Germany would then go on to lift in the World Cup on another 3 occasions. 74, where they win it on home soil. Again in 1990 in Italy. It's interesting enough here. That's the second time Italy hosts the World Cup. And most recently, they lifted the World Cup in 2014 in Brazil, after beating Brazil heavily in the semi-finals. To mention, Germany have a fantastic history with football. But I should say, recently, this probably might be the worst time period for Germany in the football, because they actually went back-to-back World Cups. That's in 2018 in Russia and again in 2022 in Qatar, where they were knocked out of the group stage. That is the first time that has happened in their history. Though they've played better in the Euros and had a really good Euros back in 2024, last year, where they were knocked out by Spain. Spain eventually went on to win in the Euros. So not the best couple of years for Germany there. So this would probably be their weakest time. But there's some really good young talent there's coming through. I'm expecting them to step up again. As I said, they had a really good Euros. They got beaten by a Spanish team that has been phenomenal, who I personally think may win 2026. But for Germany, they'll get back. Germany are currently in Group A in the UEFA Zone World Cup qualifying group. They're in a group of 4, which means they will start their World Cup qualifying campaign in September. Anyway, this was my new batch 1934 World Cup Germany video. Thanks for watching, listening. Appreciate it as usual. And once again, bye.